forget to rate,
comment,
and subscribe. And don't forget to ring the bell.
Ring the bell.
Ring the bell. The Honda Civic has been on top of the compact car segment since, well, about as long as I can remember, actually.
But the new Mazda 3 is here with all-wheel drive, a premium interior, and a fresh new look.
Is that really enough to take on the people's champ?
We've been given a few years to warm up to the look of the new Civic, and I don't think I'm there yet. In fact, this hatchback version of the car is actually pretty ugly. On the other hand, this Mazda 3, well, it looks a little weird too because it has no character lines and no shoulder and a huge C-pillar. However, I think it looks great in motion.
Looking under the hood of the Mazda, we find a 2.5-liter inline-4, making 186 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque. With cylinder deactivation technology, it can get down to 27 miles per gallon, which sounds all right, but is actually not that great when you compare it to the Civic. Its 1.5-liter inline-4 makes 180 horsepower and 162 pound-feet of torque. That's a little less, but you do get 34 miles per gallon combined and 40 on the highway.
In comparison to the Civic, the Mazda has a very clean and classy interior. I love the layout, and the use of materials in this cabin is really high-end. It wouldn't look out of place in something like an Acura or even a Lexus. There's also a ton of technology, including a head-up display and a digital gauge cluster. But one thing I'm not a huge fan of is this tiny infotainment system. Yes, it has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support, but you have to navigate it with this rotary knob, and it looks really funny and small on the screen. On the other hand, if you're looking for a compact car with a lot of space, and I know a lot of us are, this isn't the car for you. You see, there isn't a lot of space behind me right now, and when it comes to cargo space, there's only about 20 cubic feet of storage. And that's much less than what you get in the Civic.
And just like on the exterior, design is where the Civic falls down on the interior as well. There are angles going every which direction, there's fake carbon fiber up here, there are buttons that are kind of too small to see and a little bit inscrutable. It's all a little bit of a mess. It's really busy compared to the Mazda. But that busyness does lead to a lot of practicality. You get cup holders down here that slide back and forth. You get a little cubby down here that you can pull your USB through. And you do get much more out of your infotainment system than you do in the Mazda. Ultimately, the decision between the two is whether you're a fan of minimalism or maximalism. All right, now that we're behind the wheel, I can tell you that this Civic actually drives really well. It gives you a whole appreciation for the way the 1.5 liter delivers its torque. It's really good low and mid RPM kind of thing, which is where you'd want it. So it feels a lot faster than its small size would convince you it is. In other areas too, I think that it's as good as the Mazda. The Mazda has a little bit of float at the front wheels that I don't think this one has. Basically what I'm trying to say is the driving dynamics are pretty much a wash. I wouldn't say that this drives a lot better than the Mazda 3, but it certainly doesn't drive worse. And for a car that's been the darling of automotive journalists for years because of the way it drives, that's a big deal because I think the Mazda 3 has lost a step over the years. Meanwhile, the infotainment is where the Civic kind of falls down. It's busy, there's way too much, it's like the interior, frankly, and it's hard to navigate. There are buttons for everything. I have to press like 16 buttons to change the radio station. It's just kind of a mess. But what you do get is a lot of practicality in here. You get an inch more headroom and an inch more legroom, roughly, in the back seats, and that amounts to way more than you'd think it would because it's way more comfortable back there. So basically, the cars are pretty evenly matched, but this is way more practical, way more fuel efficient, and way more economical just to buy in general. So what does the Mazda 3 have that this doesn't?
And by now, Sebastian is probably saying that the Civic is actually a really good all-rounder. And he's not wrong. It's pretty good to drive, and it's got a nice turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. But this motor has so much more power in the higher end of the rev range and a ton of torque as well. It also comes with a conventional 6-speed automatic, which feels more natural on the road. And as a whole, I find that the Mazda is very fun to drive with really good steering. I don't know what he's talking about, floaty front end. It feels really good. And a lot of that has to do with Mazda's G-Vectoring Control and G-Vectoring Control Plus, which limits a little bit of the torque of the vehicle to add weight to the front of the vehicle and improve handling. And if you're looking for a vehicle with all-wheel drive, your list is very short. It's basically this and the Impreza. And we've already discussed before that the Impreza just doesn't really compare to the Mazda 3. And beyond all of that, you do get a vehicle that is really quiet and refined. There's a really limited amount of NVH. I do think that sometimes when the engine is revved really high, you'll hear a little bit of that in the cabin, and there's a little bit of wind noise as well, but generally this car is quieter than most other compact cars, and that's a big deal. And these two vehicles that we have here today are pretty well equipped, but there is a pretty drastic price disparity between the two. This car costs just over $30,000, while the Civic costs around $27,000. This comes with all-wheel drive, and it also features a more well-rounded suite of safety technology. You see, we get real blind spot monitoring, and not that cheap, weird lane watch thing that Honda offers. Although Sebastian will probably swear that it's better than real blind spot monitoring. Additionally, this has adaptive cruise control and forward collision warning, and it has a pretty high-resolution rear-view camera. Is all-wheel drive, this premium interior, and the safety technology really worth a $3,000 difference over the Civic? I mean, you also have to consider that this car is not nearly as fuel efficient and doesn't have as much space. So, I'm not so sold. The Mazda 3 is certainly better than it used to be. It has a premium interior and it's finally offered with all-wheel drive.
Yeah, but the Civic is way more practical, it costs a bunch less, you don't have to mess with all-wheel drive, and it's way more fuel efficient. On balance, I'd say it's the better compact car.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and ring that bell.